Absolute Joker is the greatest version of Joker ever made. And if ever there were any doubt about that, this comic answers it. So the cool thing about this, right, is that this picks up with Batman on the hunt alongside Harley Quinn. Because keep in mind, at the moment, in this entire Absolute Joker and Absolute Scarecrow story arc, the idea was introduced to Bruce that his origin, his story, and his life is far more nuanced and complex than he thinks it is. And Absolute Joker has had far more of a hand in Bruce Wayne becoming Batman than even Bruce Wayne realized. So this picks up 13 years ago in the outskirts of Gotham City with Harley Quinn. And the statement's made, Harley, it's the middle of the night. What are you doing down there? Because she's literally just hiding under her bed. And she says nothing, right? It's just too bright in my bed. And so her mother asks, right, were you writing to your dad again? And she says no. And so that's where her mom's like, okay, well then let's give your bed another try. Okay. And so Harley asks, right, can you leave the light on for a little bit longer? And her mom's kind of like, I thought you said the light was too bright. And she's like, it was, but my eyes have adjusted. So kids are finicky. And so her mom says, you don't still think there's a ghost in your closet, do you? Are you sure that's not the reason for the lights and for whatever you were not writing a moment ago? And Harley, kind of being a child, but also being a little more mature at the same time, is just like, a ghost? Seriously, Mom? Why would you even think that? And honestly, I think there's a little fear in here because it's like, I hadn't considered that before. Why would you put that thought in my head? And so her mom says, look, Harley, I know this is a big change, but Mom is here to do important stuff. And where Harley asks, is it brain doctor stuff? Her mom says, kind of, right? Mom's here on a secret mission to stop something bad. And Harley asks, right, something bad how? And her mom doesn't give her an answer. And so that's when she just says, here, I've got something for you. And when Harley asks what it is, her mom tells her, right, that you are named after a play, the Harlequin play. And she says, the character in the play Harlequin carries a magic mallet, which I'm now giving to you. And Harley is almost a little dismissive about it, like, a magic mallet, are you serious? And her mom just kind of tells her, look, here's the thing. Ghosts aren't real either, in the same way that you don't really think this mallet is magic. But the reality is that if you believe that ghosts are real, then they're real. And if you believe the hammer works, then it works. Even if it's not true, it's true. And so in a lot of ways, it's her mom basically telling her, if you believe that this hammer is not really magical, then you also believe that ghosts don't exist. Magic cannot exist if ghosts don't exist. And so it's kind of a cool little line of logic to sort of teach her daughter the reality of the world that she lives in. And so of course, Harley asks her mom to leave the light on, and her mom's just like, no. Of course, she goes to close the door, she turns the light off, and then there's a creaking sound from her closet. And so Harley just kind of says, go away or I'll bash your ghost head with my mallet, right? So as a little kid, she's kind of starting to believe it. And that's where she starts repeating this statement to herself. Even if it's not true, it's true. And she says it over and over and over again. Now, of course, this is a flashback because in the here and now, we pick up with Harley Quinn and Batman, and they're facing off against the cops and they're facing off against the Robins. Now, I will say the cops and the Robins are basically a kind of background element to this entire story. This is just designed to show that they're still on the hunt for Bruce. Lest we forget, the Robins, right? Dick Grayson, Duke Thomas, Jason Todd, Stephanie Brown, so on and so forth. Basically everybody but Cassandra Cain. That they are essentially agents created by both Jack Grimm and Deathstroke. Jack Grimm, of course, being Absolute Joker. But they're kind of this depiction or this military operation that's working directly against Batman to quote unquote, reassure the people of Gotham that the city's being taken back from the insanity of Bruce. Because one of the things that we saw was that Commissioner Gordon jumped off a building, basically at the manipulation of Absolute Scarecrow, but the entire city of Gotham thinks Batman killed him. So basically he's public enemy number one. That was kind of how they established the license to go after Bruce. The cops are just the other side of this, right? The cops are going after him as well. And so the reason why I say they're a background element in this is because in the midst of all of this, Harley asks, are you even listening to me? And one of the cops is like, yeah, I guess. And Harley's like, does it look like I'm talking to you, cop? Flatfoot, right? And at that moment, the cop's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, she's talking to Batman. So a little bit of humor being injected in here. But at that point, when Harley starts talking to Batman, she says, do you think I want to talk about all of this? It's the last thing that I want to tell anybody. And Batman just tells her, then stop talking and get out of the way. But Harley says, no, because I know where you're trying to go and you need to turn around right now, right? This is a rabbit hole you are chasing, and you do not want to find out what is at the bottom of this tunnel, because I promise you, it is not going to be what you think it is. And that is a true statement. Batman has no clue what's waiting for him at the other side of this whole equation. But when he gets there, it's gonna turn his life upside down. And so that's where one of the cops is just like, listen to your little freak, Batman, right? Like, put your hands behind your head, turn around. And at that point, of course, the cop gets hit with the mallet and Harley Quinn continues on, right? Now, where was I? And of course, Batman tries to get her to shut up, but she won't talk. Right? And so, of course, Harley Quinn, being the leader of the Red Hood gang, they know the city in and out, which basically means they can get through and navigate through the city in a way that no one else can. But it also means they've actually done their own construction on the city. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second, because it's pretty dope. What ends up happening, of course, is that as the Robins are hunting for them, the Robins can't readily find them, right? Just because of the fact that Harley Quinn is so good at hiding. And so that's where she continues on with her story. And she says, my mom was a neurologist. She started working for JK when I was a baby in their psych farm department, helping design drugs that slowed cognitive decline. At first, she loved it, but then something changed. She must have really witnessed something bad, like extremely bad, because when I was 4, she decided to make it her mission to expose Jack Grimm. So she moved us to Gotham to get deeper in. It was just me and her, the two of us, in that crooked little house. She and my dad had broken up before I was born, and mom never wanted to talk about him. She said I could ask, but I didn't want to hear it from her, so I ordered one of those DNA kits behind her back and tracked him down myself. It turns out he was a doctor as well, living in a small town in France. Their breakup had been rough. He didn't even know that she was pregnant with me when she left. When I was little, I'd pretended to write to a dad, but now I started writing to the real one. I had lived online a lot, made friends that I'd never met, just to have people outside of that house, because it's an entire life of isolation. And jumping back to this moment with Batman, she says, the more research I did on Grimm, the more worried for her I became. Even my dad started to worry, not enough to do anything about it or show up, but he admitted that Grimm was dangerous. And where she starts to continue on, Batman again is kind of tuning her out to a degree, trying to find a way essentially out of Gotham itself. And so he ends up approaching this tunnel. And that's where Harley's like, look, we really shouldn't take this tunnel, man. That tunnel is gonna be loaded with cops, I can guarantee you. I know their patrols, I know how they think, I know what they do. We should not go there. And she says that, right? Did you hear me? That route is gonna be swarming with cops. The other way is clear, and I can finish telling you my story. Now, here's one of the really cool comparisons. But the reality here is that in the moment, Batman is on a mission. He's hunting for something, trying to get to a location, and that is more important than the cops. It's one of the big differences between absolute Batman and Batman in the main DC universe, because Batman in the main DC universe would just walk by them. Like, he probably wouldn't really even concern himself with them at all, to say nothing of the fact that he would certainly understand the city of Gotham much better than absolute Batman does. But with absolute Batman, this guy will just attack pretty much anything in his path, which is why we love him so much. Because when he sees these cops, he just tells Harley Quinn, hold back, right? Stick close. And that's where Harley's like, okay, so we're gonna attack these cops, aren't we? And Batman just like goes in and attacks every single one of these guys. He doesn't take like the ninja stealth approach. No. This dude goes in guns blazing. And that's where Harley's like, okay, all right, cool. If this is what we're gonna do, then let's do it, right? And I mean, they take these guys out in something like 7 panels. I mean, it's a very, very quick fight between the two of them. But that's where Harley asked the question, right? Why do you think the 10 suits showed up as soon as we downed that squad the last time? And Batman's like, what are you saying? And she says, I'm saying that we need to hide as soon as possible. As soon as we defeated that last group of cops, the Robins showed up. And it's because they're hijacking the police signal. The cops are the ones who are on the hunt for us primarily. The Robins are just sniffing out their trail. So honestly, we need to stop attacking cops. If we want the Robins to not know where we're at, leave the cops alone, man. I think it's really, really cool that like Harley Quinn is the one that's taking more of the stealth approach, because it's almost the inverse. As you guys know, in the main DC universe, Harley Quinn is the one who will see a guy, and depending on what kind of mood she's in, she'll attack him, right? Maybe she decides to attack them because they inconvenienced her. Who knows? She's every bit as insane as the Joker. But it's so interesting to see that on some level, it's a dichotomy shift. Right? Batman's the first to strike instead of being stealthy, and Harley is the first to be stealthy instead of being the first one to strike. Not only that, we do get this small little moment here, which honestly I think is particularly important here, that where the Robins are on the hunt for Batman, they're bickering amongst themselves. Now, one of the things that we saw in the last video that we did is that Dick Grayson isn't really a true believer. Dick Grayson does believe that Batman is a problem and believes that Batman needs to be taken out, but not at the expense of everything around him. And he certainly doesn't agree with the idea of collateral damage. In the initial fight between Batman and Robins in these giant mechs, when Batman was just putting the screws to him, to be quite frank, that Dick Grayson was concerned about buildings that were being destroyed, going into the buildings, making sure nobody was stuck in there. And one of the things that we were talking about was that Dick Grayson will likely be the first to defect from the Robins and join Batman. And one of the things that you guys were hitting at is that that's probably going to lead to the other Robins defecting and then joining Dick Grayson. Because at the end of the day, even though there is a lot of bickering here, and even though Jason Todd doesn't agree with everything Dick Grayson says, especially the idea of we should go back and regroup, that for the most part, everybody else does. So seemingly everybody sees Dick Grayson as the leader of the Robins. Jason Todd just does it very grudgingly, which is likely going to lead to a fight between the two. But at that point, we switch back over to Harley Quinn's story. And with her getting older, one of the things that she says is, my mom started spending more and more time away. She had never gone into detail about her work, but I knew she was going after Grimm for some sort of medical malpractice. Around the time of my 13th birthday, I got the sense that things were coming to a head. My mom seemed obsessed, vanished for days at a time, barely talking to me when she was home. I became terrified that Grimm would find out what she was doing. Me, I didn't care if he was ever caught. I just wanted to get out of that crooked house. My father was getting scared, really scared. And in fact, one day he said that he would come assess everything using my birthday as an excuse, which makes sense, right? Even if it is your long lost father that you've never really known, if you write to him and you say, hey, look, mom has become obsessed. She's looking at going after this extremely dangerous man. I need you to do something about it. Her father is likely going to respond if ever she mattered to him. And in fact, that's what her father says, right? He would put aside whatever grievances he had with her mother just this one time, because checking on the daughter that he never knew he had, and honestly extending some kind of an olive branch and building a relationship there, is way more important than the anger and rage that he has against his former wife. And so Harley says, it gave me this glimmer of hope. Him coming after all this time, I counted down the days until he was supposed to arrive, and finally, the moment came. That's when the closet door opened. This time though, instead of shutting the door, I went inside. And that's where you jump back over to Harley and Bruce. Now, the cool thing is they've kind of approached this wall, right, that almost seems impassable, save for this small little grate down at the bottom. And Bruce is like, you expect me to fit through that? This little tiny hole? I mean, sure, you could fit through it, but if you're guiding me out of the city using secret tunnels and any number of things, why would you leave me here? And that's where Harley's like, you know, you're really dumb sometimes. She says, look, the Red Hood gang exists in the in-between spaces, online and offline. The powers that be create mazes. We find ways to cut through those mazes. And so what she's really talking about here is some Harry Potter type stuff, not in the sense of tried and true magic, but in the sense of constructing their own version of Gotham within Gotham, which is to say, they've modified this wall. And what they've done is they've constructed it so that the wall will open up. It's really cool. It's pretty dope to know that that's what Harley Quinn and the Red Hood gang have been doing, building their own way through this maze. It's pretty phenomenal because seemingly that's how Gotham was designed. It was designed to bring people in and keep them from ever getting out. It is partially a physical maze, but it's also an economic and political maze, keeping people mentally, emotionally, and financially trapped in the city, which is a pretty crazy way to think about the construction of Gotham over the years. Now, of course, the Robins end up tracking down the tunnel and they end up heading out that direction, but they don't actually go into it. Again, there's a little more bickering here in terms of what they should do. But when Dick Grayson says, look, guys, we've been at this long enough, we're exhausted, we're all arguing amongst each other, the reality is that we should go back, get some rest, and then we'll pick it back up again tomorrow. Jason Todd doesn't want to. It's an obsession to destroy Bruce Wayne. Now, there is a little nuance here that we do have to pay attention to, which is that from Jason Todd's perspective, he's a believer, which is to say he thinks that Batman is legitimately dangerous because he has bought into the propaganda that Batman did kill Commissioner Gordon. But it's not an entire mental state. It's not like his entire worldview has shifted or anything like that. He's not fully immersed in that. Instead, what this is an instance where he believes false information. That can be fixed. So that's why it's a really cool indicator that not all is lost for Jason Todd. And presumably there's an argument to be made here when the truth outs, which speaking truth to power has any measure of results, some of which are good and some of which are bad. There is an argument to be made. Jason Todd might be the first one to defect, and that Dick Grayson and them end up following suit, which would actually be a really cool twist on the Batman mythos. But continuing on with the story, Harley Quinn says, at the back of my closet, behind my mom's clothes, I found something. I found a panel. The password took a while to crack, but I got it. And then suddenly, the floor started to descend. It was an elevator going a long way down. It's matching the story of Alice in Wonderland, a story that I do have memorized, believe it or not, but down, right? Will the fall ever come to an end? That's how the story goes. Eventually, she reaches the bottom. And when the elevator door opens up, she initially calls out for her mom, not in some great big, huge, grandiose way, but a very timid way, right? And that's where she starts walking down this hallway with all these windows. And one of the first people she sees is actually two people, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Now, at first glance, I thought this was Clayface. I was actually talking to Snyder at the time, and I was like, hey man, is this Clayface? But then like going back through and looking at it, I was like, never mind, this is Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Mostly because he just says dee-dum, dee-dum. Tweedledee and Tweedledum in the main DC universe are actually cousins. They're not brothers, but they look almost exactly alike. And by and large, while they are enemies of Batman, they're mostly associated with Mad Hatter. And while we don't really see a whole lot of them, we just see they're conjoined twins. Now, we don't know if they were merged together or if they were born conjoined. Because this is the absolute universe, and because this universe, especially Batman, has some of the darkest shit you could ever imagine, I'm inclined to believe they were merged, right? Some Cenobite type shit, for those of you guys who remember that scene from the Hellraiser movies. But then like in seeing him, it terrifies her. She bumps back against the wall, and then she sees Calendar Man. Now, honestly, we could make a video about Calendar Man all by himself. This guy is painfully unappreciated in DC Comics, and I love the fact that he's getting some representation here. But Calendar Man, his story and the way he works is already so horrifying. I love that Scott Snyder doesn't really bother to change it. The nature of Calendar Man is that he quite literally, quote unquote, dies in the winter and then is reborn in the spring. Effectively, he molts and like emerges out of his body. It wasn't always that way. Julian Day just used to be a guy who committed crimes based on the seasons and holidays and different things like that. But his story has changed over the years. The point is, Snyder doesn't really change it all that much because it's already so screwed up. But when Harley sees this, she freaks out, right? She says, there was this old man who was dying right on the floor in front of me. And then he did die. And this kid ate his way out of the body. Some twisted kind of rebirth. I don't know. All I could do was scream and scream and scream until a hand grabbed my shoulder. And that's when her mom is standing there. And she just asks, Harley, what are you doing down here? And Harley, being terrified, right, looks at her mom and says, what happened to you? And her mom just says, was that I was wrong about Jack Grimm. He's not hurting people, he's helping. And now I am too. The cures that we're working on, the breakthroughs. So in essence, she's been taken by Jack Grimm. At some point along the line, Jack Grimm got a hold of her mom, twisted her and broke her. And now she's an agent of Grimm. And that's where Harley says, right, we have to go. Like, we have to get out of here. Dad will be at the house in any minute. And her mom says, no, I can't leave Ark M now. Our new crooked little house, I will show you everything. This is home. And that's where Harley just says, she was not my mom anymore. She belonged to that place. She was Dr. Arkham. And so I ran. I ran to that elevator and never looked back. And so that's where Harley starts to realize Batman doesn't really care. This is not the end of her story, but she realizes Batman doesn't really care. And she asks, right, haven't you been listening to me? I'm opening up to you here, right? This is stuff that no one in the Red Hood gang even knows. The people that I've spent my life with, they don't even know this. And so that's where Batman just says, whatever happened to your mom, it's got nothing to do with me. And that's what Harley asks, do you know why the crows are scared of the Scarecrow, Bruce? Not because they think he's a man. They're afraid because they don't know what he is. He's something in between. He looks human, but smells like straw. The Joker and his kind pump billions into making people feel scared and angry. And they use people like Scarecrow to point all that anger and fear at some enemy that's not real, a ghost, a dummy, anything other than the truth. But the brilliant thing about Scarecrow, he starts with some semblance of truth. And that is what makes those things so terrifying. They say the most convincing lie is a lie that contains a bit of truth to it, because then at that point, it blends the line. Where do you differentiate between what is true and what is false? It's what makes that lie so convincing. And that's really where the Joker resides. The Joker and Scarecrow ride this line between true and false. And so it makes it very easy to hoodwink everybody in Gotham, to say nothing of the fact that fear is a powerful motivator. Negativity bias. Once upon a time, two cavemen were walking along a path and they both heard a rustling in the bushes. The one who ran away lived longer than the one who went to go investigate. Fear is how human beings survived and evolved. And that's what Harley Quinn is putting at here. She says, your mother was in the Court of Owls. That's true. But past that, there is nothing I've been able to verify in a way that Scarecrow might not have manipulated. Not the Joe Chill part, and definitely not what you're after right now. So sure, we know for certain your mother was in the court. Everything else that you had and saw in that envelope that was presented to you by Commissioner Gordon, but effectively left for you by Joker and Scarecrow, we don't know how much of that is true and how much of that is false. Do not go down this rabbit hole, Bruce. It's going to destroy your life. And Bruce responds, do you think I don't know that? Right? That's what I'm going to prove tonight. I'm going to prove what's true and false. Leave me alone. But Harley Quinn tells him, right, they're playing you, right? They've turned the city against you. Now they're going to turn you against yourself. The whole motivation behind what you're seeking here is going to destroy you. Keep in mind, we don't know what he's hunting for. We just know he's hunting for something. And so that's where Harley says, fine, if you're not going to stop, then I'll stop you myself. And as you would expect, she stands no real chance against him. She does blast him with an electric shock from her hammer, but the reality is it doesn't really do a whole lot against him. He grabs a hammer, snaps it in half, and then Harley, just in her anger, says, I know what you're going through, and it's only real if you believe it's real. And Batman just seizes her by the throat and just says, you have no idea what I'm going through. And at that point, Harley Quinn walks away because Bruce doesn't want to be saved. And so that's where he shows up to a cemetery and to the grave of Thomas Wayne, takes off his helmet, starts crying, and starts digging into the grave itself. And that's where Harley contacts Pennyworth, and it's just like, we're done. The Red Hood gang, myself, we are done with Batman, right? He's going down this path, and it's going to destroy him, and I refuse to be a person who's there when it happens. And so that's where she continues her story, right? That what ends up happening is when she flees down the hallway and back into her closet again, she finally comes out, and she hears her father, right? Harley, sweetheart, is that you? And she says, Dad, thank God you're here, right? It's Mom. He did something to her down there, Jack Grimm. And that's when she sees Jack Grimm standing there, absolute Joker. And she's like, what are you doing here? And he says, you asked me to come check on your mom, remember? And I think she's doing very, very well. And that is when Harley puts two and two together. All the identities, all the fake names, all the locations he's existed throughout the world. Harley Quinn in the absolute universe is the daughter of absolute Joker. And it's bonkers. That's not even the craziest revelation in the comic. That's not even the craziest revelation in the comic, because in that moment, she's flabbergasted, leveled by it. And in fact, she refuses to believe that it's true. But that's when her mother comes up from down in the basement and says, no, it's true, right? Your father and I, we're back together now, and we're going to fix the world. And so Harley just takes off running, right? Realizing that both of her parents are corrupted and screwed up. And so that's where you switch back to Bruce. And the whole time he's digging through this grave, he keeps telling himself, go ahead, he's in there, you know he is. And when he gets to the grave and pops open the casket, it's empty. Thomas Wayne is not in the grave. And that's when Bruce gets a phone call and absolute Scarecrow's on the other end and says, I don't like to leave a message, and says, I've got someone here who's been waiting to speak with you for a long, long time, Bruce. And that's where he says, Thomas, guess who finally called? It's Bruce, your son, taunting him the whole time. And Thomas is like, Bruce, no, please, right? Don't let him see me like this. And that's where the phone gets hung up by Scarecrow. Bruce Wayne's dad is alive and being held by Scarecrow and the Joker. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. I told you, man, this comic is amazing. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.